What's going on? You good? I hope you're good. So this is my 7th episode of I Swear to Drunk I'm Not God before I go in for surgery. I actually go in for surgery tomorrow. I know, it's weird. I'll probably try to do an episode while I'm down. And then kick out one right before my healing is done, probably like 2 weeks. Yeah, I'll still be on hiatus. So yeah, and I'm grateful for you all being so patient with me, per usual. I know it's been a long, slow road that we've been on, unnecessarily slow probably, but I'm almost normal. As you all know, we have a lot going on. I haven't fully decided how I'm going to handle the rest of this season. If I'm going to do a full 20 episodes, if I'm going to stop at 10 and start a new season, I don't know. As most of you know, I'm considering trying to write a little mini script this year, trying to do something different. I'm going to shift this podcast into possibly streaming too. I'm still planning on doing that. So yeah, I got a lot of plans, and I'm, trying to work it out and figure out how I'm going to do it. I'm going to use a little bit of my downtime to do it. So yeah, with that, I wanted to make sure I got an episode in before I went into surgery tomorrow. And then I'll be working, like I said, on one while I'm down. I'll have one when I get back. I'll probably record, honestly, because, this shouldn't be too bad. It's outpatient. And then, and yeah, we'll see what happens next. I'm kind of playing, as you know, this season by ear. I would have been much further along by now. Usually by summer, I would have been literally on break, but I took a much longer break right before the election, as most of you know. So anyway, who are we doing? So this episode is about the happy face killer. His name is Keith Hunter Jesperson. I actually got this idea from Dustin. He had hit me up weeks ago and asked me if I had ever heard of him. And I was like, negative, never heard of him. He was actually going to be on this episode too, but he's not feeling good. So I was like, let's take a rain check. It's cool. I got a lot going on. Luna's at grooming. I'm trying to get ready for this surgery. Let's just, adult shit. It's cool. It's totally fine. So we're going to do this one solo. Cool. It'll be quick. Painless. So yeah, we're going to do the happy face killer. The poison on this episode is the Blackberry Bourbon Smash. Unfortunately, I cannot drink. I fucking know. Me and my mom went to Gibson's Italia and I had mocktails. Annoying. But for this cocktail, you'll need bourbon, lemon juice, blackberry, maple syrup, mint, and ginger beer. Okay. Very simple to make. All you need to do is you need to muddle a sprig of mint with fresh blackberries and maple syrup. You add ice. You add You add bourbon and lemon juice into the mixing glass. And you shake until chilled, and then you strain. And you shake in a cocktail shaker. You strain, and then you pour it in a rocks glass filled with ice, and you top it with ginger beer. And boom, you garnish that with a ginger sprig, for the fresh blackberry and the lemon wedge, and you got yourself a Blackberry Bourbon Smash. I cannot wait to try this. When I found this recipe, I was like, ooh, this sounds so good. The book that I read for this episode is The Happy Face Murderer, The Life of the Serial Killer Keith Hunter Jesperson by Jack Smith. Now, it's, it's normal, terrible. It's not, I'm not going to sit up here and be like, oh, it's not bad, because it is. It's definitely not great. Keith Jefferson, the so-called happy face killer, left a trail of victims all across the United States. So we're going to dive in mostly into his early life. You know how I roll. Then we're going to get into the crimes And then we're going to get into, of course, what led to his capture. We're going to keep that quick. He claims he killed 160 people, but you know how they get down. They be lying. But there were only about 8 confirmed. So we'll talk about what we know. Okay, we're not going to inflate this shit and make it bigger than what it is, because these people are fucking egomaniacs. Now we're going to start from the beginning. Sip. I'm going to drink my water. And I didn't open it. All right, let me adjust my mic. All right, so Keith, that wasn't a burp, that was my throat. Keith Hunter Jesperson was born April 6th, 1955, which makes him an Aries. Surprising. No disrespect to Aries. In a small town called Chilliwack in British Columbia, Canada, to Leslie and Gladys Jesperson. Now, he was the third of 5. So there were 2 boys and 3 girls. Now, Leslie, the dad, was domineering. And it makes sense because he grew up in his own shitstorm. Okay. Now, when Leslie's family found themselves cold and hungry during the Great Depression, Arthur, who was Leslie's father, did not mince words when making him feel like a failure. His father was not the type to accept defeat. The family claimed to be descendants of the, quote, warrior Danes, which didn't exist. I mean, this was likely something that Keith made up or his family made up, but it seems that it was made up. I mean, this was made up to invoke this sense of Nordic warrior mythology, which was this sense of savagery and strength, even though the origin was never really explained. This can only be assumed. But Danes were a group that settled in Europe and Denmark during the Viking Age between 8th and 11th centuries. The warrior Dane is not really a thing. So I don't know if they were just saying that they were Dane warriors. I don't know. But with that being said, it does speak to how much of a fucking barbarian he actually was. Because if I were to equate this to another episode, I would say he gives almost Carl Panzram-ish vibes in barbarism. And barbarism, is that a word? Yeah. And Ed Kemper, a little bit vibey, a little bit. It's a lot. Now his great uncle, Arthur's brother, was committed to an insane asylum for trying to kill himself by hammering a 3.5-inch nail into his own skull. So Leslie was raised like this. I mean, they were local blacksmiths. So they ran a shop forging horseshoes and shit. And by the time Keith was born, Arthur was just an old demon geezer. He never spent time with the kids. He felt like women were a waste of space. Leslie was resourceful, though. As he aged, he became a blacksmith, a plumber. He taught himself hydraulic engineering, Morse code, electronics, how to manufacture different items like coffins. And he even taught himself how to write poetry, play the accordion and the keyboard. I mean, he would not allow himself to fail at anything ever again. He had many jobs, many businesses, aka he spent 0 time with the wife and kids. Oh, and here's the fun part. He was a drunk. So to Keith, this wasn't really a bad thing. He was a strong figure that demanded respect. If the kids showed any signs of laziness, they were beaten. Point blank, period. Now, needless to say, Leslie became an absolute piece of shit. He was physically and psychologically abusive to the children. And one time he encouraged Keith to pee on an electric fence when he was working on it and laughed when Keith was electrocuted. Now, here's the thing. It's what the fuck? He was also openly disrespectful to his wife. He was telling Keith that the only reason why he was still with her was because of her cooking. Now, disclaimer, this portrayal comes entirely from Keith Jesperson. So now Keith Jesperson, the happy face killer, is a known liar and a manipulator. And while there may be truth to the dysfunction he describes, there's no independent verification that exists that confirms the severity of the abuse that his father may or may not have done. Like there's no way to confirm this. Now, Gladys, his mom, Gladys, she was a hard worker. She was present for the children, but she was strict, very pure. Apparently, she found sex abhorrent. And when she was growing up on the farm, the women were not allowed to be present when the animals were breeding. That's how pure they were. There wasn't a single member of the Jesperson family allowed to see her, including Leslie, her husband, without her clothes. If that makes any sense, which is like, I do not know how exactly you all had kids. I mean, maybe it was like peekaboo and let's do this and I'll just keep everything. Or she just had to keep her. I don't know. That was not explained. Now, sex was never a topic of conversation. She was incredibly religious. She was passive. So when it came down to the abuse of the kids, she just didn't get in the middle of it. Keith was neglected by both parents emotionally. She favored the girls and Leslie favored the other two boys. So he was in the middle alone. Now at 5, Keith found a friend and it was a brown lab, a dog named Duke. Duke protected Keith and Keith would discuss Duke with anyone. Duke would also be Keith's first bit of exposure to sex. Now, hear me out. This is not where it's not going to go where you think it's going. Because when I wrote that sentence, it sounded like it was going where you think it's going, but it's not going to go there. Duke would attempt to hump other female dogs a lot. And so Keith would later say he gave him a, quote, head start about sex. Okay. Now, he began to act out. One time, he dropped a brick on his younger brother's head, and his sister took the blame, and he loved it. So overall, Keith was kind of an ass, but he was quiet and obedient. He wasn't bright, sometimes shy. He daydreamed a lot. He was kind of dense. Like he had issues with focusing and he dealt with a lot of bullying. He was withdrawn and it seemed that he only really found joy in the family's favorite game, cribbage, which turns out I played this as a kid. I had to look up what cribbage was and I was like, what is this game? And then when I looked at the board, I was like, I used to play this. Cannot tell you what it is, how to play it, but definitely used to play it as a kid. It's weird, some of the things you remember, but I do not know how to play that game anymore. But Keith's relationship with his friends was strained. He was the black sheep. Violence was starting to rear its ugly head. He killed one of his father's birds by striking it with a rock, and he got a real whooping for that because his dad had this giant menagerie where he kept all these birds. And so when he killed the bird, his dad really fucked him up for that. Now, Keith would have some trouble making friends. He attempted to make one friend, but he got in trouble, when he tried to choke him to death, which is shouldn't do that. Bad idea. So, of course, Keith got beat for that. Now, Keith once went swimming with a boy who tried to drown him in a lake. And when Keith got his hands on him, he held his head under the water with every intention on letting that kid die. But then the lifeguard stepped in and saved the kid. So Keith started to see his reality for what it was, which was difficult all the time. He was dealt a bad hand. He could be gentle, but he could also be dangerous. And somehow he needed the ability to separate the two. So he created Keith's world. Keith had Duke, right? And this is what he called it. It was Keith's world. Keith had Duke, sure, but he was exposed to animal death a lot, like killing gophers, which he did on a regular basis on the family property. Leslie couldn't stand cats, and he ordered them to be killed often. So Keith would help him do that. And then Keith enjoyed this and would sometimes torture the animals with garden tools. They'd attach firecrackers to birds. They nail crows to boards. They'd throw knives at them, and they'd feed Alka-Seltzers to seagulls, which apparently would, his favorite thing to do. And I am still trying to figure out what this means. Crimping together cats' tails using wires, throwing them over either side of a rope, and then watching them claw each other to death. The creativity, most of the neighborhood boys found this entertaining. Let me just stop. Y'all don't get mad. Boys, there was a sociological experiment that they took. I can't remember who it was, but they took a group of girls and they took a group of boys and they put them. I can't remember if it was like a classroom or what, but anyway, they gave them all the same shit, and I think they just trying to figure out like what they were going to do when given the same resources. And the girls, when living together, organized, cooked, fake cooked, and, kind of was trying to figure out how to like live together and like live amongst each other. And of course, there's going to be some conflict, but they were just trying to figure out how to do stuff together. But the boys like fucked up everything. Like the boys really messed up everything. And I don't know what it is about boys, but boys really need things to do. Like y'all really need things to do. And I'm saying y'all, and because I'm specifically only talking to the guys. Because, and this isn't the only time I've read this when researching this type of stuff, where boys do awful things to animals. I actually don't hear about this often. Now you do hear about this with women as they get older, as they've experienced like abuse, specifically like, especially at the hands of like a father, or a parent of any sex, but then, or something has happened and usually they're experiencing some sort of trauma, mental illness, and they have then become so sick that they start just like harming things. Usually it's children, right? Like they start harming their own kids. Like I just did that episode on Andrea Yates, or, they start harming other people's kids. It just depends. Right. And I feel like that's something that kind of just like develops over time. But young boys seem to not really care about a lot of things really early. And I feel like they just need a little more guidance sooner. Like I really don't know the study on this, so I'm not even going to pretend like I do. But this is more of just like me observing all of these different stories. Like even if you take, movie Lord of the Flies, or you just think about how like men survive versus how girls and women try to find a way to survive. They're two totally different modes of survival. Men tend to act in a very carnal, sometimes savage hunter way, because that is kind of like the nature of the man. and women just don't. And I think that could be because of our maternal, instincts, as mothers, as, women who ultimately have children, like actually deliver children. We have that maternal instinct. But that I feel like that emotional disconnect to living to a life force is a major issue with males and how they emotionally connect to things. Because I hear like too many stories about killing animals. And, they had that, you can tell when somebody's, and they ended up saying that this isn't true, but usually they wet the bed, they start fires, and they kill animals. It was kind of like this triad of, when that motherfucker's going to be completely psychopathic, these are kind of like the indicators, right? And which ended up completely being debunked. But I think the killing of animals is at such a young age, is so very appalling in a way, especially if you're like not in that industry. Like, okay, cool. Like you had to butcher a cow for a burger. Got it. Sure. But like just being, 5 and being like, oh, let's put some Alka-Seltzers in a seagull because we want to see their bellies explode. Like there's a disconnect there. And it just feels like boys need that like extra emotional guidance. Not that it's not there. It's just not naturally there. That was a very roundabout way because I'm like trying to talk it through. But, and I'm also trying to be respectful because I don't really want to just be like, men are crazy, but I just feel like there's just too many stories of that. And usually that men just have to be nurtured in a real way. Not that girls don't, but men really need to be nurtured. And in our society, we really do not do that enough. This expectation of just like men just needing to get out of our house and just work and go get families. No, because they are becoming psychos and emotionally withdrawn, completely removed, liars. They don't know how to connect at all with nature, with women, with society, which I think is a lot of the reasons why politics has taken the turn that it's taken too, is because the people that are honestly in charge do not know how to do what needs to be done to make the world better. So that's kind of what that's my roundabout way of saying that. So anyway, the Alka-Seltzer thing, like, it's just like whatever. And, like killing cats and like all that. So, like, that's just insane. And it's very creative that like, this is what you do in your pastime. I just feel like the boys need to truly be sat down and taught how to emotionally connect with other human beings. You cannot just throw them out into the world and think that they're just going to get it. And I think that's where we're making our mistake. Like, and I guess this is a great conversation to have because I'm having this surgery tomorrow. But back when I did want kids, I always wanted boys. And that was primarily because I don't know why, honestly. I think it was too because I was a tomboy. But I always felt like if I was going to be a mom, I felt like I'd be a great mom to a son because I always had that like a nice balance between masculine and feminine. And 2, because I'm a very caring and respectful person, but I'm also a straight shooter. And I also feel like I can tell you when you are fucking up, and I can tell you when you're fucking up in a respectful enough way. I feel like that. I'm not saying, and I'm in no way, shape, or form perfect at all, but I feel like sometimes when people bring boys into the world and they just send them out there thinking that, all right, go get you a woman and have her teach you some shit. Like, no, it should have started with the mom and the dad and how that dynamic was. And if that dynamic failed, then it would have needed to be a true conversation between the two parents on how they were going to teach that child how to love. And I think that's where that's where the problem is that nobody teaches their children how to love other people. You know, like they don't teach their children that. I know we are all still trying to figure out how to do that, but I feel like it starts with respect. I mean, we can start there and we can work our way up. And then with every encounter, you can kind of like check off a box and be like, you know what, John? No, not that. That's wrong. No, that's right. But that's wrong. No, that's right. And that's wrong. And then over time, you know, you kind of like mold the character of a person, but to just throw them out and then expect the world to teach him, like the world's fucked up. You can't expect the world to teach him shit, you know? So anyway, I'm off topic, but I just wanted to say that. So anyway, where was I? Alka-Seltzer. So messed up. Now, most of the neighborhood boys found that entertaining, and alongside torture, though, came sex. Keith had his first kiss around like 5, and he thought he was practicing sex, which really, it wasn't sex. They were just making out. One time at a neighbor's farm, a worker offered to teach the children about sex. Now, he did say that he was sexually assaulted eventually, and there's really no record of when that happened. In this particular instance, he said he was too scared and ran off, but one of the neighborhood kids was actually sodomized by a dairy worker. He learned that. Keith was not. By 12, the family would eventually move to Salah, Washington. Now, Leslie relocated the family for work. Keith really didn't want to leave. He could barely get close to anyone before he really, he could barely get close to anyone before, and he really couldn't get close to anyone in the United States. Because remember, he is Canadian. So, you know how we are against Canadians, unfortunately. So he really couldn't get close to anyone in the States. Keith ended up being a pretty big kid, like stature, like he was large. He got picked on for this, of course. He got called Sloth, Fatty, Hulk, Tiny. His brothers nicknamed him Igor, Ig. And this stuck throughout his school years. I mean, he was isolated again. He was always playing alone. He finally got a friend, and this time they got caught stealing. Now, Leslie was pissed, but not surprised to hear that Keith was the mastermind. He was like, okay, cool. And from then on, his dad called him Little Thief. Like, after this, no more friends. He was banned from seeing friends, which I'm like, that is not how you solve that issue. By 8th grade, he was in Keith's world, and Keith's world only. He wanted to go back to Canada, and he had dreams of one day being a Mountie, and which is one of their mounted officers. But an encounter with a relative who just came back from Vietnam, or who had come back from Vietnam, his war stories of like blood and guts triggered Keith's memories of torturing animals. And he realized that it was giving him sexual satisfaction. Yeah. So he didn't have access in the States to any of his stray animals. So one time Keith chased down a tomcat and he shot it with a BB gun. He shot it full of pellets. He smashed its paws. It took 56 pellets to kill. As he moved into adolescence, women posed a bit of an issue for Keith. He didn't spend time with them. So he started researching it. Now, for some reason, in his mind, he mixed up the concept of sex and assumed that the girl on top was raping him. Yeah. Another issue I have is when you are like hyper anti-sexual and you do not teach your kids about sex, this happens. I know I've talked about this before. You cannot avoid sex conversations. I know it makes people grossly uncomfortable, and I know religion has like completely demonized the topic, but it is an act that exists in human nature, and it is not just for procreation. It is also for recreation. And unfortunately, some people have desires, and if you start to equate it with something taboo, and you don't let your child know how to do it and how to move through it healthily, they will figure out how to do that from either other people, or they will figure out how to do it on their own. And when they figure out how to do it on their own, sometimes it is not the right way. The fact that he is mixing up the concept of sex with rape is a big problem. That's a big problem. And he is so isolated that he has no one to talk to confirm this data with. So when he wrote about his first sexual encounter, he said that she was raping him over and over. Now the question is, because who knows, right? Was he in an encounter with someone that was actually raping him or not? Right? I mean, this could have been that type of scenario, but would he know? This is why it's important to have these conversations with your children. I don't know. I just don't know why people are like, it makes my brain hurt. So by high school, Keith was 6'2" and 200 pounds. He tried to get into football, but when the coach told him to kill, quote unquote, his opponent, he was like, does hell go with no? He was like, no, because of course he's thinking literally. And when he did play and he would like charge people, he went for the gusto. Okay. And he actually hurt people. So he started to get dismissed from the games, which I think Suge Knight used to do the same thing. Like he was just like way too forceful. Now the coach was kind of cool with it, but Keith was not. So he quit the game. Now Keith got older. He started to get into alcohol. His father was okay with this because his father's a drunk. He allowed his kids to drink at home. And shockingly, he had even allowed them to have keg parties, which I'm like, wow, Leslie. By 16, he would get his first car. And that freedom would allow him the privilege to go out into the woods and kill every animal in the animal kingdom with his .22 caliber rifle. Then one day, karma struck. Leslie shot Duke, claiming that he came home and Duke was dying. He said that he got hold of coyote poison and had grown sick, so he had to kill him. And after that, Keith wanted revenge and would scare the piss, and I mean literally, out of every dog in the house. One was so scared of Keith that it bolted into the middle of the road and got hit by a car. Now that Keith was older, sex was on the brain. He was starting to find relief in masturbating because talking to girls was a feat. He was a weirdo. He was big. It was a lot. Any girl he talked to seemed to want him for money or a ride. He just didn't have anyone to talk to about any of the sex stuff, dating, nothing. Good luck talking to his parents, please. His mom, come on. His siblings, not going to happen. So he just dreamed. Sad. That is really sad. He dreamed about raping people. He dreamed about kidnapping people. He dreamed about overpowering girls. This is an incel. People act like incels are new concepts. They are not. We just created a name for it. An incel is a gateway to a serial killer. That's it. If you know anything about any serial killer who spent his career raping women, kidnapping them, controlling them before he murdered them, most of them had an incel life in the beginning where they were like isolated, or they like couldn't get dates, or women, blah, blah, blah. They had this real deep hatred for women, or they started picking up prostitutes and things like that. And then they started abusing these women. And sometimes the prostitutes were easy for them. They were easy targets for them. One, because the prostitutes were to them throwaways. And two, because the prostitutes to them were the type of women that they can kind of just like, okay, you justify me doing this to you because of the type of position you're in society. I can do this to you. I can rape you because you are walking around at 3 o'clock in the morning coming from the club, right? These are the type of conditions that lead to me doing this to you. It justifies their actions. So we call it incel now, but these men have kind of always existed, right? Like if you ever watch Soft White Underbelly, a prostitute is a prostitute. She wants to get paid. Maybe she'll rob you. But a great deal of the time, she most likely ain't gonna kill you. Only time she's gonna kill you is if you try to rape her, which is warranted in my opinion. Like you try to rape her, it's an exchange, it's a transaction, it's business. Like you pay her for sex. You go home. She goes home. Or she goes to the next John. That is literally the transaction. The only time someone is harmed is if you choose to harm her, or she robs you, you choose to harm her and something happens, or you choose to, or her pimp does something weird. You know what I mean? Like, yes, regardless, it's a dangerous transaction. Don't get me wrong. But a lot of times when you watch Soft White Underbellies, these girls like what they do. They just hate the fact that men get violent. That's what they hate. They hate, like I always tell people, I'm like, when you feel these ways about women, you need to watch interviews of prostitutes. I watched this one interview of this one woman who was talking about like her experience with Johns, and the guy from Soft White Underbelly was like, he just asked her point blank. He said, what are your worst experience? It was a black chick. What are your worst experiences with Johns? And black chick was like, unfortunately, the best experiences are with Mexicans and the worst experiences are with black dudes. Said it flat out. She said she didn't see a lot of white dudes because of the areas that she was in. She said she kind of stayed away from white dudes because white dudes could get scary, because white dudes, tend to be serial killery. She said the black dudes can sometimes be like, they'll punch her and shit like that. It can get violent with sometimes the black dudes in the area. But she was like, the Mexican dudes, she said they were a little different because they would come home or go to the hotel. They just want the exchange. Like they getting off work. They want a little coochie. They willing to pay for it. That's it. They very rarely went violent. So that's why even with this Trump supporter shit, it's like, y'all over fluffing the situation. In the words of a prostitute, I don't know. But when you think about like what these women are experiencing, most of them are only fearful if, like, I said it was $40, you only gave me 20. That's when things go way haywire. I'm on a total tangent, but I was just thinking about this. It's like, this is how the incel has always existed. The raping, the kidnapping, the overpowering of women leads to the serial killer. In the 1970s, they just jumped straight to the serial killer. Like, how did he was just on the road, like killing all these women. No. There was something that led to that. You don't become that overnight. That's why I focus so much on the histrionics, because you do not just up and decide. You don't wake up a 50-year-old and decide that you just gonna travel up and down the West Coast murdering women. Just don't wake up like that. It's usually incel shit. And they usually start with people from the bottom rung of society, and that's usually prostitutes. And then they escalate. Again, most of the time, too, these motherfuckers be having wives. But that's what's crazy. So anyway, I digress. Mind you, by the way, he's dreaming about raping, kidnapping, and overpowering women. He's not even a senior yet. Keith is getting dates here and there. And finally, he settles down with someone. He picked up wrestling. He liked it. He was on the team. He used it as an outlet. And through wrestling, he was considered a bit of a jock. But unfortunately, during a rope trial, the fastening snapped and he injured himself, resulting in a nasty sprain in his left foot. Now, his girlfriend, because he had a girlfriend at this point, stopped calling. And now he had a little bit of limp. He couldn't kill animals anymore. That upset him. But he still continued to work in the family business. Eventually, he would find out, though, that he tore ligaments and had to have 3 surgeries. Now, this ended his dream of becoming a Mountie. So still working in his dad's store, Keith didn't really know what to do. One day he would meet this woman named Rose Pernick. That's a fake name. Her first name is correct, but her last name isn't. They dated. And even though her family didn't trust Keith, she figured this was the best way to get out of her parents' house. So she married Keith. And on August 2nd, 1975, they were a couple. They moved into a mobile home because the mobile home was parked on the Jesperson property, soon to be turned into a trailer park. And at the same time, Keith was granted $33,000 in a settlement for a lawsuit for his fall and invested it in the trailer park. He and his father were now business partners, with his wife, Rose, as the accountant. Now, Keith was also a peeping Tom. He had a little bit of issue with this at the trailer park. And he fought off quite frequently the urge to kill something. That used to come up a lot. That he struggled with that. That was a concern for him. He would just wander off in the wilderness sometimes to kill a cat or some shit, or just like random creature and like slam it into the pavement. He just had to. But his father was like just as sick. He would just like drown cats in a bag for no reason. Keith would use anything lying around. I'm talking tools, guns, knives. He would throw it out of a moving car. He would poison meat and then kill a bunch of them at once. But the problem was that, again, he received sexual pleasure from this. And now, even though Keith's dealing with all of these weird feelings of murder and sex, he and Rose started trying to have children. Right. Yeah. But Keith had a low sperm count. So Rose was desperate, though, and even put them on an adoption list. He was under a lot of stress, too. So there's that. The mobile park was failing. So after 2 years, they sold it. He needed the money and decided it was best to just find a job. So he took a job at a local trucking company. Now, Keith and Rose had their first child in 1979. Her name was Melissa. And a year later, they had another kid named Jason. Now, Keith never beat his children, made sure his father didn't. With that being said, as a truck driver, Keith wasn't really present. He was present 5 or 6 days a month. This was not working. The marriage was failing. Keith was a fucking horn dog. And when he couldn't get what he needed, he had to kill something. Eventually, Rose would get pregnant with baby number 3. And they would settle into a new home back in Canada. Now, when he was trucking, he felt free. When he was around his family, he'd get frustrated because he enjoyed the bachelor lifestyle. He had the freedom to do whatever he wanted to do. When Rose was around, she made her aggravation known. And he was growing concerned that he was going to lose his kids because he was actually very, very into his kids. Eventually, he would lose his job, though, for theft because his dad was interested in these like leather overalls that he had at the welding shop. He ended up stealing the leather overalls, which is funny because his father called him a thief when he was a kid and whatever. The next 2 years after the theft, Keith was on the hunt for another job in Canada. So Rose didn't really like being in Canada. It was too cold. And so Gladys, the mom, was battling cancer. So the family was like, look, we'll just move back to the States. Now, Keith eventually got another trucking job and lived on the road. He was too busy to kill shit. He was getting frustrated. He was like, I need some wiggle room here. And as a trucker, he had access to a lot of women. But he would lose his job again. Okay. By 1986, Keith was fucked up and the family had to file bankruptcy. He found another trucking job. He was free again. His sexual frustration was at an all-time high. He found himself hitting it off with a swinger couple. Okay. This was the first time he cheated on his wife. He broke the seal. Okay. Keith was picking up women all the time, woman after woman. Anyone but a prostitute, though. That was a bit too lowbrow, even for him. And one day he stopped and he picked up this 15-year-old Native American girl who was caught in a storm. He offered to give her a ride, and while driving, he fantasized about raping her. He was checking off all of the boxes in his head. He was like, wait a minute, my plates, my ID, the load. She could tell her father. I don't know. He didn't do anything. He stuck to only women that consented. He was frustrated. He decided, you know what? I'm going to go kill some fucking animals. So he stoned some cats. He drowned some dogs. Cool. All in front of his children, though, which, like, what? Okay, sir. Like, give me a break. Now, after the situation with the young girl, he decided it was high time to start picking up hookers because, all right, fuck it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give me some hookers. Convinced that her husband was turning into a flaming piece of shit and her marriage was failing, Rose decided to start going on the trucking trips. It didn't work out because Keith joked one time about pushing her on the truck stop pimps. She didn't like that joke. She didn't find that funny. When he got home, he was so pissed that she even went on a trip that he drowned a fucking cat. Yeah. So then there was Peggy. Peggy could keep up with Keith. She could totally keep up with Keith. She was trash. They would have sex. She would even travel with him in his truck. She was a waitress that Keith had met on the truck stop. And he eventually told his wife that, you know what? I want a divorce. Okay. At this point, Rose didn't care. Next thing Keith knew, he was coming home to an empty home. She packed up the kids and she moved in with her parents in Spokane, Washington. Keith was upset. He had Peggy and would eventually move in with her after losing his job again. And when he finally got another job, he was living okay for once. He was living with a woman that he actually liked sleeping with, but the child support payments were killing him. His father didn't like Peggy, though, and Keith would later agree. Peggy was a lot. Keith started to make plans to get back with his family after the divorce was finalized because the divorce would eventually get finalized. And Peggy was okay with that. She was like, all right, you do your thing. I'll do my thing. They had a farewell drink and Keith left again. And he was feeling guilty about leaving his family, apparently. But when he didn't come back, she was asleep. And he had sex with her multiple times while she was asleep. Which I'm like, wow. And when she asked about it later, he acted like, he didn't know what she was talking about. I don't really know. He would leave to see his family all the time, just in and out for a couple of weeks. But he would not stop thinking about Peggy because they operated on the same sexual frequency. Now, the bigger issue was that Peggy was she'd flirt with all the truckers. She was shitty at trucking because, by the way, he got her a job as a trucker. She was really just a road lizard, but he wanted her as a trucker. Now, Keith got laid off, though, and he would start to hear from the former coworkers that she was unfaithful, extremely unfaithful. And they told him that he needed to dump her. So then in 1990, Peggy found out that she was pregnant. And Keith stopped messing with her at this point. He was like, nope, not me. No, sirree, Bob, you need to go ahead and get that DNA test. He had actually just moved in with this woman. This man had multiple sclerosis. He moved in as his caregiver. And this took a turn, actually, when he started to feel bad for him. He was like, man, this man kind of needs to die, because he felt dangerous around him, because he was like, I kind of feel like I need to kill this dude. So he decided to move back in with Peggy. This is so messy. Now, he would not see much of Peggy because he was unemployed. Peggy wasn't. So he was living with Peggy's mom, right? While Peggy worked. Now, you know what they say, idle hands are the devil's workshop. Keith Jesperson was thinking maybe it was time to start killing some people. Now, on January 21st, 1990, Keith met 23-year-old Tawana Bennett at a bar in Portland, Oregon, and invited her to his rental home. He tried to initiate sex, but she wasn't having it. He got upset. He wrestled her onto the bed. Now, she figured she wasn't going to win. He's a big dude. So she was like, yeah, okay, look, hurry up. She was like, hurry it up. And that really set him off. So Keith punched her in the face and he hit her in the temple. It took a few more blows for her to lose consciousness, because he apparently kept punching her. She would not lose consciousness. This was the first time he had ever hit a woman. He hit her 20 times. He hit her so many times she was unrecognizable. He couldn't take her to the hospital, but instead he strangled her to death and poured himself a cup of coffee afterwards, which is something that he consistently did. Like, he'd kill someone, pour a cup of coffee, kill someone, go get a cup of coffee, kill someone. I don't know if it was like, you know, they say, and I didn't look this up, but they say that, like, let's say you're about to go out. This is a weird comparison, but let's say you're about to go out and you need to take a power nap. They say you should go drink a cup of coffee before your nap, because when you wake up, you get this like burst of like energy. I don't know if he like connected that somehow to like this, like, I don't know if like the kill made him feel like exhausted, and maybe he like the cup of coffee, or like, kind of gave him a burst of energy, or like maybe the cup of coffee kind of made him feel like, I'm gonna go get me a cup of coffee. Like, I don't know what it was about that. Like, it's like, oh, the best part of waking up, like, I don't know what that was about, but he, I don't know if it like helped him clear his thoughts or what, because then he had to figure out like how he was going to dispose of the body, like what he was going to do with the body, because rigor mortis eventually set in. This man doesn't know anatomy. He doesn't understand that rigor mortis is going to happen. So the body was just sitting there, and eventually it just got really rigid and it got heavy. He disposed of her body off a highway and tried to make it look like a hit and run. He had his first kill and he got away with it. Now, hear this. This is wild. So there was this woman named Laverne Pavlinac. She was experiencing domestic abuse at the hands of her live-in boyfriend, John Sosnovsky. Now, Laverne met with investigators, and she told them that her boyfriend raped, murdered, and disposed of Tawana's body, and she helped. And this just goes to show how fucked up domestic violence is. And you already know I'm about to go on a tangent. But let me finish this. They were arrested March 5th, 1990 for the murder, rape, and disposal of Tawana, and convicted in February of 1991. Now, to avoid the death penalty, Sosnovsky pleaded no contest, and he was sentenced to life in prison. And then Pavlinac was sentenced to less than 10 years, which she didn't expect. I guess she expected that because she was a victim that she wasn't going to really get anything. I find it very interesting that they just literally took this woman's word for it with zero investigation. That just, that just goes to show how, messed up this area is, this system is, honestly, because what this random woman calls in and just like, oh, we killed this woman. And they're like, okay, sure. And they just took it and they just ran with it. I find that very, very interesting. Like, it's one thing to be like, we did some investigating, we got some DNA evidence, blah, blah, blah. Like, they just literally took the confession as it and was just like, cool. What? And the reason why, because, at the time of this recording, there are a lot of things going on in celebrity gossip. And one of the things that's going on is Halle Bailey and DDG, who are like, whatever, young, celebrity couple. If you don't know them, Google them. And, domestic violence between these two young stars or whatever. And there's a lot of discourse on the internet about them because she ends up filing a restraining order. And so the conversation about domestic violence came up, and this video goes viral. This guy who is basically just like, domestic violence is normal. And I had ended up making a video where I basically said domestic violence is absolutely not normal, and do not let anybody convince you that it is. This just goes to show how serious her domestic violence was, or which I do not know the details, but if it is bad enough that you have a live-in boyfriend that you are willing to take a murder charge or willing to get him arrested for murder, that's telling. That's telling. Because part of me is just like, you could probably just call the police and say that this man was beating you. And depending on the jurisdiction, depending on the sheriff's department, depending on the police department, a lot of women are not believed. They do for a long time, specifically. I mean, and not until really recently. This is why I keep getting into these arguments with these people, and I'm exhausted by it. Like, I'm very tired of getting into these arguments, because at this point it's ad nauseum. The male-female conversation is so jaded at this point that it's kind of no point in even having conversations with men about women, because they refuse to understand. Men are going to feel the way they feel about women. Women are going to feel the way they feel about men. At this point, we're just going to have to figure out how to deal with it. And I don't know how that's going to work. I really don't. At this point, I am just wanting to look for my person and just fucking deal with him, like, and just leave it at that. Because this idea of like treating it as a bigger conversation is absolutely useless. It's useless, in my opinion. There will never be a mass understanding between the two sexes. Absolutely not. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. It's not, at this point, because people thinking that it is appropriate to put their hands on a woman, or even a woman thinking that it is appropriate to put their hands on a man to fight, is ridiculous. I don't understand what that is about. It is not healthy in any relationship to be fighting. Period. To physically have an altercation is unhealthy. I don't know who is teaching people this shit. As adults, if you cannot figure out how to have a conversation to resolve an issue, you are emotionally immature, and you should not be in a relationship. If you have to physically touch someone, if you have to yank them, pull them, do anything like that, that is ridiculous. If it is getting to a point where we are physically touching each other, relationship is over. It's over. I don't understand this conversation. And I think this acceptance of it is crazy. You know what I mean? Like, people online being like, oh yeah, like domestic abuse is normal. It isn't. And how people choose to get out of it. When I read this part of this case of this woman calling in and basically saying that her boyfriend raped, murdered, and disposed of the body, and said that she helped him, because ultimately she could have actually just said that he did it and called it a day. But for some reason, she said that she helped, which is like, what? And I think that it's really, really weird that so many people are comfortable with that over being by themselves, over being alone. You are so comfortable with being uncomfortable with a person that is willing to haul off and slap you in the mouth. I wouldn't even be able to sleep. Like, even when I was in my situation, I got so uncomfortable, I did not even want to be in the same room as him. I was sleeping in my second bedroom. That is when I was like, I am a guest in my own home. I'm a guest in my own home, and I do not know who this person is, and I am freaking the fuck out because that experience was foreign to me. And it kicks people into fight or flight mode. And if you get into fight mode, or you get into flight mode, or either one of those modes while in that relationship, why are you staying in that relationship? And then even people, get mad at how people ended. Like, people were upset because she got and I'm not saying people, like everybody in the world, so relax. I'm talking about just like the conversations that I was running to online and some of the comments that I was seeing where people were like, oh, well, she got a restraining order against him. It was like, yeah, he was stalking her. He's clearly mentally ill. What the fuck are we talking about? I just think it's so inappropriate to be having these conversations about these people as if it is unrealistic, because you're also teaching other women to be fearful of that sort of reaction. Don't react that way. That's not the way you're supposed to react. Don't do that. That's why some women are afraid to call the police. I was afraid to call the police. Like, I was like, oh my God, what if they come in here and then I witness all the cops fucking shoot him? Then I have to deal with that trauma. Like, it's a totally different experience when you're the person on the other side of abuse. And I've said this before. If straight, quote unquote, straight men were the ones that were being pulled into alleys and being bent over and brutally raped and murdered all the time by strange people, they would be having a totally different feeling about all this shit. They would be having a totally different feeling about all this shit. If they were on the prey side of the conversation, they would be having a totally different feeling about this shit. Even trans people who are consistently taken advantage of by quote unquote straight men, even gay men who are taken advantage of by quote unquote straight men. They would be on the other side of this conversation if it were happening to them. But because the power dynamic is the other way, they will never understand this. They will never understand what it's like to be a woman. And I think sometimes because I'm always surrounded by men, I'm getting increasingly more frustrated with trying to explain to men that I'm around what it's like to be a woman and have them look at me in my face and not fucking take me seriously. It's infuriating because they think that you're bullshitting, whether they act like they believe you or not, because inherently somewhere in their lives, some man told them that women are liars, or some woman lied to them and they're projecting their bullshit onto you. Like, I know I got homeboys that judge me based on their past experiences with other women or based on whatever they feel like they've heard about me. I already know that that's the case. I already know. I know. I got the feeling. You know, specifically my straight friends. Like, not worried about my gay ones, but my straight ones. They're filtering, you know, how to treat me through my exes, through their experiences of me, through how I look, through their ex-girlfriends, through how women have treated them in the past in general, through how their moms have treated them, through how their sisters or cousins have treated them, through how whomever has ever been a coworker has treated them. That is how they treat me. And I, on the other hand, am filtering them through the men that have treated me a particular way. But I am trying consistently not to do that. And I feel like because of the emotional work that women do sometimes, we try harder. Men give up too easy on the emotional work. And like, I'm disappointed in how quickly men give up. And that's why I was like, you know, maybe I'll put a pin in dating. It's not that every man is a piece of trash. It's not that. It's just that I'm at least fucking trying. And I don't really see where you're trying. Like, if you put in as much effort as you put in your workouts and your fucking, you know, car, if you put that much work into your emotional health, then maybe. But if I feel like I have to constantly explain to you that I'm a woman, I don't think this is going to work. It's like, I thought that was a given. Because I haven't been a tomboy a great deal of my life, I have put in a concerted effort to understand men. And I've said it from the beginning of this podcast, I enjoy I enjoy men. I enjoy male company, but I'm very disappointed in them. I'm disappointed in them. I'm disappointed in how they choose to not do the fucking work. Like, try hard. Like, just try. Like, there's no effort whatsoever in emotional growth. None. And so you get this back and forth conversation about, oh, right, but I know that's happening to you all at this rate, but this is happening to men. Yes, I know. I'm very aware that this happens to men. I know. But I also know that there are so many people who are, oh, my dog just entered the chat. Hey, pussycat. Who have been walking around who do not absolutely do any of the work and who post online some of the most foul, ridiculous statements on the planet about serious topics that young men are looking at. And I'm like, oh my God, please don't have kids. 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 That's what I'm thinking about. So anyway, that was my rant. I'm moving on. Anywho, so my dog, see, she went to go get grooming, and now she's back and she's being an ass. Take a nap. You should see how she's looking at me over this laptop. All right. So anyway, I'm moving on. I said what I had to say. I just get so upset by this topic because I do. Like, I really be, I be sincere and people be playing in my face. And I think too, I'll say this too. I think that people are so used to liars and fleeting, people who do not have character that they think that I be lying, and I just really don't be lying. And I say what I mean. And so, like, when it comes to, especially now at this age, when I was a teenager, a little questionable, but when it comes to like certain things, like I genuinely be meaning what I say. And so many people are used to like people who are foul that they think that I'm playing. And I think I get so frustrated because I'm like a true, genuine person. I don't be fucking playing with people. So when I say things like, I'm like disappointed in how men are moving, I can be disappointed in how women are moving too. But I see so many women who are trying, and I see more women trying than I see men. And maybe that's the problem. I'm not around enough healthy men that are trying, and it's disappointing. And I'm sick of having arguments with them, and I'm sick of like having to consistently, you have the same discussions about shit. And then, sometimes it's like the mental gymnastics of just like, why don't you see me as a woman? And why don't you just understand that I'm not a woman to annoy you? This is me. It's my being. The bigger issue is that men don't like women. That's the bigger issue. Men inherently don't like women. That is the problem. The truth of it is, if men could only be around men, they would prefer it that way. I follow this one person who said something along the lines of, men have, and I'm using this loosely, they have homosexual relationships with their homeboys, meaning that they are willing to literally die for some of their homeboys. They don't care about their girlfriends. They don't care about their wives in the same way that they care about them boys. They have the emotional connection with the boys, their homeboys, to the extent that they don't have enough room for any of the women in their lives. They just don't. They don't leave space for them. You can have a homeboy that you've known for years, and he can meet some new dudes, and he treats them better than he could treat you, and you've known him longer. A whole different relationship, well-rounded, robust, because they have inherent connection to other men that they will never have with women. It just is what it is. So anyway, after his first kill, he told Peggy he killed someone, but he didn't tell her who. And so I will say this. At the same time, he was almost extradited for sexual assault. But his charges were reduced and he was like sent home on a bus. But while he was at the bus station, He was frustrated that the Laverne and John situation, the wrongfully convicted couple for the murder of Tawana Bennett, he was upset that they were getting all the notoriety for that. So he went to the bathroom and he wrote a note, and it said, "I killed Tanya," he meant Tawana Bennett, "on January 21st, 1990 in Portland, Oregon. I beat her to death, raped her, and loved it. Yes, I am sick, but I enjoyed myself too. People took the blame and I'm free. Happy face." And that was a smiley face, not the words happy face. Now, the truck stop wall note was the beginning of his quote unquote happy face killer persona, which was kind of him blending like narcissism and control and the need for notoriety, because he was like, hey man, that was me. And serial killers do that. Serial killers want you to know that it was them that did it. They don't want somebody else to take it. He didn't want to go to jail for it either. He wanted them to go to jail for it. But at the same time, he wanted somebody else to know that he did it. On August 30th, 1992, there was another victim, Claudia. Now, she was unidentified, but then they found out Claudia was her name. In Blythe, California, Keith thought that she was pretty enough, quote unquote. She told him that he wanted sex. Or he told her that he wanted sex. She was like, look, all you gotta do is ask. Threaten me with a good time. Look. So she set the prices. He got forceful and he repeatedly raped her. Now, Claudia, she didn't run though. Okay. Instead, she asked for drugs. She was a drug addict. So he gave her $20. And, he wasn't into drugs. That wasn't his thing. He was upset about the drugs. He didn't tolerate the drugs. He didn't tolerate drugs in his truck. That wasn't his vibe. So she hopped on the CB radio and asked other truckers for heroin. And so he was furious about that. She even threatened to tell security about the rape. He was like, you are doing way too much. So he went, bop, locked the doors, taped her to the bed, and raped her again. Now with Claudia, he started strangling his victims until they were unconscious. And then, waiting for them to regain consciousness, he started that choking, wake up, choking, wake up, choking, wake up thing. He did that like 4 or 5 times. If I'm not mistaken, the toy box killer started doing that. He did that 4 or 5 times until she died. Her body was found along Highway 95. She remains the only one of his victims that was yet to be identified. And then later they identified her. Well, and by identified, based on who he said she was Claudia. But in September 1992, there was Cynthia Lynn Rose in Turlock, California. Rose, a sex worker, entered Jesperson's truck, Keith's truck, while he was sleeping. He was a little apprehensive about that one because he heard about Eileen Wuornos. You remember Eileen Wuornos? Eileen Wuornos was the woman who was going around Florida killing John. She was a prostitute. I did an episode about her. He strangled her and left her body in the garbage at a truck stop because she had just like hopped in his truck while he was sleeping. He was like, there's a chick that's killing people on the highway. I ain't about to be your victim. He had nerve to be scared. Now, Keith was getting pretty used to the killing thing. He didn't fear it. It was easy for him, almost too easy. He didn't even fear repercussions. In November 1992, there was Lori Ann Pentland in Salem, Oregon. Pentland was a sex worker who she attempted to double her fee, basically. Keith didn't like that, so he strangled her after she threatened to call the police. Then in June 1993, initially known as Carla or Cindy, there was this woman named Patricia Skipple. She was also formerly identified in Santa Nella, California. Keith raped her and choked her over and over about 5 times. Skipple's body was found and her death was initially considered a drug overdose. Now, Keith later confessed to her murder. In April of 1994, Keith wrote a happy face note and sent it to the press, the Oregonian newspaper, instead of the police. He mentioned killing Tawana and that he was that she was not the only one. That one failed. So he delivered another one to the same paper because, he's like, wait. He mentioned where the bodies had been left and taunted them with how easy it was to get away with. He also said that he wanted to stop, but he didn't know how. He wanted the reader to check over your shoulders. He's really bad at this. Ended the letter, yet again, with happy face. Now he started to do research on killers in the area and realized that some magazines were referring to his crimes. So he started writing them, to the magazines to correct the record. In September of 1994, there was Suzanne. I will mess her name up. I think it's Kajellenberg in Crestview, Florida. Keith claimed her name was Suzanne. She was trying to get out of Florida. He choked her, raped her, left her on the side of the road. Now, this time he left a calling card, which was a nylon rope on her neck. I don't know if he was going to consistently do that or if he just did that to her. Her body was found near the Holt exit on Interstate 10. She was identified in 2023, actually, through DNA technology. On January 27, 1995, there was Angela Subrise in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Subrise was about 21. Keith choked her 4 or 5 times until she died. Put her in a plastic bag. Now, the disposal of her body was really crazy. He did a lot. He fastened her beneath the truck's trailer and dragged her down the highway until her body pulled apart. Her body dragged between the wheel and then grazed against the tarmac. He dragged her for 12 miles and her body started to split apart all over the place. And the assumption was that people would just assume that she was roadkill. So, yeah. In 1995, March, Julie Ann Winningham in Washougal, Washington. Winningham was Jesperson's girlfriend. Now, they broken up and they reconciled multiple times. Keith and Julie had a volatile, strange relationship, and Julie had a drug problem, and Keith felt like she was starting to really get on his nerves. They even got engaged at some point. Around this time, he was thinking about having his own sex slave, but Keith claimed that she was using him for money, which infuriated him even more. It may be time to get rid of her. Additionally, he felt betrayed, paranoid that she might report him to police or at the very least leave. So Keith picked up Julie and they spent a little bit of time together. But during the drive, an argument escalated over money. And she was like, I just need some money to fix a car. I think she said she had some to get a new ID. It was just like stuff like that. He said, I don't have it. And mind you, because they were engaged, she felt like, what's mine is yours, what's yours is mine. You should give me the money. He was so over it. He strangled her and told her about all the murders. Now, mind you, she was alive. He choked her again, but right after he hopped out of the car to pee. And just as he was peeing, a sheriff's car pulled up. Now, she was still alive and she promised not to say anything. And he was like, you be quiet. You could prove your love. She was like, I'll be quiet. She didn't say anything. As soon as the cop pulled off, he strangled her and she died. March 30th, 1995, Keith was arrested at a truck stop in California near the Arizona border. Now, Julie's body was discovered a day after the murder, and he was being investigated for murder, arson, and rape, because that was another thing. He liked to set shit on fire. He didn't do it a lot, but he did it here and there. He would honestly set animals on fire too. He was interviewed for 5 hours after being taken to Washington. He was released due to insufficient evidence, but swabs of DNA and blood and fingerprints were taken. So Keith considered running to Canada, but instead, Keith, while on the road in Arizona, attempted suicide by taking a bunch of pills. He kept trying to take these pills and even trying to go to the top of a mountain and die of hypothermia, but he failed. He even sucked at killing himself. In the letter, he confessed to killing multiple women, including Julie, and explained why. This letter was written to his brother. He then mailed the letter, perhaps as a way to finally relieve whatever pressure he was feeling. I don't know. But it didn't matter, because right after that, he called the detective that arrested him and immediately began talking, confessing, not just to Julie's murder, but to a couple other things. And I think, and most people think, that he thought that was going to grant him some leniency. He soon gave detailed accounts of the crimes, including locations and methods, details that only the killer would know. And Keith gave evidence from the scenes, like handwritings, confessions. Like, the victim's connection finally was able, like, they were able to build a case that was like too strong to avoid. You know, this man at the end of the day had, what, 8 women that he murdered. He confessed to murdering multiple women, and he explained why he murdered all of them. He was charged. He was convicted for aggravated murder. He was sentenced to multiple terms without parole. He's now 70 years old, and he's in the Oregon State Penitentiary serving. On January 7th, 1996, nearly 5 years after their wrongful convictions, Laverne Pavlinak and John Sosnowski were released from prison. The turning point came when Keith Jesperson and his attorney came forward with a full confession, backed by convincing evidence. And amongst the most compelling was Jesperson's accurate description, the location of Tawana Bennett's missing purse, which had never been found at the crime scene. Investigators confirmed that only the true killer could have known where it was. That is what got them out. Now, Keith's daughter, Melissa, his oldest daughter, is still here. His other 2 kids, nobody knows of, but Melissa is a producer for Investigation Discovery. She's written books on her dad, and she's also the host of Life After Happy Face, which is a true crime podcast. So that is the story of the Happy Face Killer, Keith Hunter Jesperson. What a weirdo. What a weirdo. What a weirdo. I don't even, there's probably nothing else that could honestly be said about that one. This man killed 8 women: Washington, Oregon, California, Florida, Nebraska, and Wyoming. Just confirmed. He got 3 life sentences. 3. And he was convicted for another murder and received a 4th life sentence in 2010. His indictment in Riverside County in California was extradited in 2009. So they just kept packing him on and moving him around and packing him on and moving him around. Possible 160 victims is insane. Let's say hypothetically he's right. That means that there's the likelihood that there are 160 women, cold case, possibly, that are just gone. And see, that's the thing about truckers. And that was the thing that he realized very quickly. I can just dump them in the middle. Like, I've gone on road trips before, and I hate that I think like this sometimes, but I'm sure we all do. People who get into true crime, or even people who watch horror films. You go on a road trip and you pass a entire strip of land, and you're like, who's searching this? Who's surveying this land? I mean, in the middle of the night, how would you know? There is so many roads that just go on and on and on and on, and there are trucks on them all night long. And unless you have nonstop surveillance cameras on every highway, absolutely everywhere, running 24/7, how would you know? And I mean, like, if you take a place, if I'm not mistaken, like if you take a place like London, if I'm not mistaken, London, they've had CCTV for decades. I don't know if they have it in their rural country, but they have been monitoring their streets for decades. I kind of feel like we may need to be surveilled a little bit. That sounds terrible. But when it comes to some of this stuff, some of these guys get away because there is entirely too many isolated strips of road. I'm keeping it a buck. Keith Jesperson learned very quickly that I can do whatever I want. I can literally do whatever I want with these women. I could dispose of these bodies very easily. No one is going to know. And the truth of it is, the only reason why he got caught is because he didn't do anything about that last body. He actually was begging to get caught. That first situation with Laverne Pavlinac was them self-snitching. And then him telling on himself, he was like begging the media, begging the cops, begging people to do something. And how many stories do we know like that, where the serial killer is like, y'all ain't gonna catch me though? It's like, I've been doing all this. I've been committing all these crimes, killing all these people. You ain't gonna do nothing, no? And it's usually on these like long stretches of roads. That's why like truckers, you know, like these truck stops and these prostitutes are on these truck stops. Those truck stops are dangerous. And like those seedy hotels that be lining those like highways and shit. I'm like, hell no. I mean, honestly, one time, this hotel was so seedy. I can't even believe I stayed in it. But I was in Savannah, and for whatever reason, I didn't want to fly out of the Savannah airport. So I drove to Charleston, and I had my dog with me. And so I parked, I can't remember, whatever, but I ended up getting picked up. My car picked me up at South Carolina because my studio paid for that trip. So my studio picked me up at the hotel in South Carolina. And I don't even know why I did this. Whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not a part of the story. So I said, you know what? That's what I did. I was like, I'm going to drive to South Carolina because it's close. I'm going to park my car at the South Carolina airport. And then I'm going to stay in a hotel, or just like for that little chunk of time. It'll be cheap. It won't matter. And it was like, let's say it was like a Days Inn, or it was, it wasn't like a John's Inn or nothing. It was like a real, known hotel type airport hotel type place. I got there and it was one of those hotels that people were like living in. And like when I got there, I pulled up and there was a lady sitting out front and she had cats. And I was like, oh my God, I made a mistake. I made a huge mistake. I was afraid. And I was like dating this dude at the time. I was like, oh my God, please stay on the phone. Please stay on the phone with me. And we were, what was it? It was like me and my dog. I was afraid to sleep on a mattress. I didn't even want my dog on the mattress. I was afraid to take my shoes off. I refused to take a shower. I was just like afraid to do everything. This hotel was fucking disgusting. And I just remember being like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I cannot sleep here. I was like willing to sleep in the chair. Like that's how disgusting this hotel was. And I'm pretty sure, I don't think I ever opened my bag. I basically kept my suitcase closed and I only peed, washed my hands, tried to keep, because I was like, I don't know if there's like bed bugs. I don't know if this place got fleas. But it was just like one of those like off the highway hotels. And I'm like, no, why did I do this? So sometimes I say all that to say that sometimes being off those like highways, those long stretch highways, and you think about these women that like hook up with these dudes in these hotels and these truckers that be sleeping. I'm like, I'm sorry. You call me bougie. Fine. Because there's no way. I don't stay in Airbnbs. No disrespect to people that stay in Airbnbs, because I know there are nice ones, but I refuse to stay in an Airbnb. But that could be too because I'm usually alone. I get couples and stuff because y'all together at least, but I'm not staying in an Airbnb. I've never actually stayed in an Airbnb. But yeah, I don't trust people enough. Like I need someone to sue. Like if something pop off, I need someone to sue. And I would prefer the lawsuit to be directed towards billionaires. Because I'm coming for you. Like I'm coming for everything that you got. And if something really, really happens to me, I want my mom to come for everything that you got. So anyway, that's a total tangent. Oh my God, this episode is such a mess. I hope you all have a fabulous week. And thank you for listening to this raggedy episode. This episode is raggedy. I already know it's raggedy. If it's too raggedy, I'm not even going to drop it. I'm going to just redo it when I recover. And yeah, I go into surgery tomorrow morning. So I'm going to listen to this tonight. And I hope you all take care. And I'm going to take care of myself. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks.